lot of our politicians and our government are saying that, yes, we have to tackle climate change. We're not going to meet our 2020 targets in Ireland. We're out of line completely.
Yes, yeah, I gather, yes.
Yeah, and even our 2030 are at risk of meeting at the moment. But they're saying that, yes, we do things as long as it doesn't do anything to dampen our economy.
Yep.
Is that a fair excuse?
Well, of course not. I mean, wealthy economies cannot keep continuing to grow if that growing is built on fossil fuels. And of course it is all built on fossil fuels. Growing economies, even though we see some slight changes in this at the moment, but growing economies always see increases in carbon dioxide emissions. And what is really interesting, and you really have to be quite careful about this, is you often get economies like the UK has said this, well, our emissions have come down in the UK, and yet our economy has grown. The reason they've come down is because we are buying more imported goods from China and we are manufacturing less ourselves, and manufacturing creates a lot of carbon dioxide emissions. So if you look at how we live our lives in Ireland or in the UK or in many countries that say they're doing a lot on climate change, actually when you look at how the total emissions from our laptops that we buy, our clothes that we buy from China, our emissions are going up. There are very few countries who are actually living lower carbon lifestyles than they were, say, in 1990. Almost no countries actually are living lower carbon lifestyles.
So with all of this, what you're saying, which is very serious, are there countries, by the way, performing and doing what you're saying?
There are some countries that are doing much better than others. So particularly in their submissions to the Paris event about what their countries are going to deliver. And actually, they're not countries like the EU or the US or the wealthy parts of the world. They're places like Costa Rica and Bolivia and Mexico. These countries are saying we are going to do a lot on climate change. So it's quite interesting with this group of countries that actually are the ones that are, if you like, they're the better examples to choose. Now, what they submit to Paris still is not in line with the 2°C framing of climate change. But at least it's pointing in the right direction. They are providing a good example. They are providing some real leadership in terms of climate change. The other thing to bear in mind is there's been some really interesting work that's come out from Piketty, quite a well-known economist, and also from the Oxfam report just recently, showing that the lion's share of emissions, about 50% of global emissions, come from 10% of the population. So in some respects, it's actually not a problem for everyone. It's a problem for only a relatively small group of people. Remember that all the people here at this COP event will be in that 10%. But most of the population are very low emitters. The top 1% of emitters in the US emit 2,500 times more carbon dioxide than the bottom 1% globally. So emissions are skewed hugely towards people who have very high carbon lifestyles in terms of their energy use, the way we live in our homes, the types of how often we fly, whether we fly business class, the size of our cars, all of these things. Now that actually sounds quite challenging, but it's also quite hopeful, because actually many people live quite low emission lives, and that's still good quality lives. So there are many people living already that demonstrate lives that are in line with the 2°C way of living. And these are not people who are really impoverished. There are many people in Europe that live good quality lives that are relatively low carbon. So we have to look at this group of people, like us, actually who have very high carbon lifestyles, and find some way of encouraging us, or maybe even forcing us, to live lives that are much more in line with the carbon emissions for 2°C. That really is a message of hope, that it's not everyone, and it's not all 7 billion people, it's a relatively small percentage of that population. And what we need are much stronger voices from across the whole of the EU. We need the UK, we need Norway, we need Germany and France to be pushing towards very low carbon futures. If big, powerful industrial countries like this, that have very educated populations, have lots and lots of money, have excellent renewable potential, if we can show that you can deliver good quality lives with low carbon emissions, that is a really good example to the world. Ultimately, about climate change, we have to make those changes. So it's much better that we make those changes in an organised fashion now, rather than waiting for the big implications of climate change later and then forced to make the changes very rapidly and in a chaotic fashion. So we need all to be demonstrating genuine leadership. At the moment, there are just a few countries in Europe that are showing that.